to see how they felt about the legislation. Because I wanted to be fair and constitutionally fair. Fair housing laws may be affected. There's a lot of things that may have affected. I question, and I could be wrong with my feelings. But until some of these things are addressed, with bringing renters, the landlords to the table, even some of the business community to the table, I cannot support legislation. And I believe working together with all people of our community is the way you can solve problems. Just not what one neighborhood association wants. We have a Salisbury West Side Revitalization Committee. They should be also included in this. Invite them to the table and get their opinion. But you have to include the renters, because it's going to affect the renters. And you leave people out. You're going to have to include the landlords, because it's going to affect their property. You just don't isolate people and make a decision on someone's life with not including them. And that's the problem I have. When you don't include the people you're talking about. Mothers are going to love their sons who go out here and commit crimes. And their mothers may be good citizens, hardworking people. But if they have a call 3 times, are you going to put the mother out because her son is doing something wrong? I look at all that. And we all have children. They're not perfect. And some homeowners have children that are not perfect. But I'm just saying, I cannot agree with the law, do not agree with putting it on a work session until I see that every segment of the population or the citizens of Salisbury has been included in this ordinance. I cannot support it, and I do not support it putting it on a work session or bring it forth until these questions are answered.
Mrs. Smith, Councilwoman Cameron?
Yes. I would like to say that anybody who has lived in Salisbury for a long time understands that this discussion has been going on with all of the players for at least 15 or 16 years. And what hasn't ever happened is the political will to do something about it. And I welcome input, but this is the time for input. And in a very quiet way, I and Councilwoman Cohen, in our own ways, have tried to work to get these, is it 6 or 7 pieces of legislation? It's a package of pieces of legislation to a work session held at a time when the public can attend, because that's the way that the legislative process works well, so that we can take input. But we have not been successful. And then the complaint that we heard was that there had not been public input. So in trying to strike a balance and not just see gridlock and a lack of political will stall some sort of positive action again, we decided that we would host a public forum to discuss this on September the 15th. And it will be here in the council chambers. And everyone will be invited. If you're a business person, if you're a landlord, if you rent your home, if you own your home, if you just care about Salisbury and have things that you think would be helpful to be heard, I want to hear them. But in an effort to make that fully transparent and to debunk some of these myths and get the facts out to people, we also asked for the support, in accordance with our council rules of order, of a majority of members of this city council to allow us to televise that meeting on PART3, not only to hold it in the council chambers, which we don't have to have council permission to do, but we do have to have council support to be able to televise it. And the answer from the other 3 council members about allowing us to televise that meeting so that those of you who cannot come could see what was going on and be informed was no. And so here we are doing the only things that we know of that are left to us as options to try to move this forward so that the public can comment, so that the council can consider it and take some sort of action on it. Hopefully action that at the end of the day, after input, will result in safer neighborhoods, because what I'm hearing is that that's what everybody wants.
Okay, Councilwoman Cohen, did you have additional remarks?
Yes. We've just had another shooting and a murder on my comment Mr. at this time. And human life is a dear thing. And I can understand Mrs. Schild's concerns. But in terms of inclusive, I have been talking to tenants. Just Friday I was talking with one who told me that their landlord comes in anytime they want without the 24-hour notice required by state law. I spoke with others who have had some bad experiences. I've spoken with landlords who are concerned about trying to get problem tenants out, which is what the crime-free lease addendum is. This package does not have to be accepted as a package. I think the mayor probably would like that. But there were several public input meetings, crime task force, research done, bills looked at from all over the country. And in terms of inclusive, when Congress decided that they wanted to tax computer services, they didn't call me and say, will you help us draft that legislation? I didn't get included in that. Part of the legislative process is to go get input beforehand and discover what the need is. And then our jobs as officials is to come up with legislation that addresses those needs. Then once the legislation is drafted and proposed, then we have another public input process, which we have been trying to get off the ground. And there were charges of, lack of transparency. Everybody's been welcome to come to these open public meetings. And I volunteered to be involved because crime matters to me very seriously. You know what it's like to have somebody walk into your home in broad daylight and scare the jabbers out of your spouse and your 2- and 4-year-old children. So in order to get this moved forward, so that we can just talk about it, doesn't mean it's all going to pass. Doesn't mean it's going to pass completely unchanged. But how can you, say that you're not concerned about tenants when you have one of the pieces of legislation is to require leases to have a tenant's bill of rights, so that all tenants know what their rights are and what the resources are to access them. Or that you're not considering the landlord's interest in dealing with problem tenants when you get a crime-free lease addendum that would be required with the lease that would help them with eviction process. And then 3 strikes, you're out. We don't want anyone harboring criminals. And when we talk about, mothers and their children, does it put the mom out? I know parents who have problems with their children, they put their children out. It's called tough love. Because they don't want to have their home seized in a drug seizure, which is where they will be headed if they don't take some action. So rather than saying, this is the perception, let's change the perception by beginning the process that we've done with all other legislation. With all due respect to all the interest groups out there wasn't this concern for the building industry when we passed building codes. They didn't get invited to the table to help us draft the ordinance to adopt new building codes. The towing companies were not invited to the table. In fact, they were denied access at a work session by Mrs. Smith when we were talking about the towing legislation because it was a work session.
May we stay on the agenda?
And we don't allow the public to participate. So this is an opportunity, I think, to get the ball rolling. Because what are we waiting for? Another crime? Another homeowner to move out? Another renter who is trapped in a situation and can't move out but would like to? I'm hearing from these people, and I hear from you. And last week I went with Mr. Stevenson's department on an inspection and saw how they do things, so that I could try to understand where do we have kinks in the system, and where might we make this better for all concerned, the landlords, the tenants, the city, and everyone else who's involved. So I've thought about all the stakeholders, but ladies and gentlemen, 28,000 citizens in Salisbury, plus all the people who own property but don't live here, cannot draft a piece of legislation. That's what you have us for. And some people are skilled on environmental things, so they help draft that. Other people are skilled on other subject matter, they get invited in to help draft that. In this case, the mayor availed himself of a national housing expert and somebody who's been very experienced in research with legislation and working on neighborhood issues. It's as simple as that. So let's get talking about this and stop operating under a cloud of myth and unknowns and what have you, and just get it out on the table, and let's all have a dialogue together. And I would just like to see part of that process is putting it on a work session agenda, because that is what officially kicks off the public input process. If the council decides to move it forward to legislative session, we can extend that process as we wish. We've done it before with other issues. We also have public hearings. We have an opportunity to speak at first reading. This is how we get it going. So that's what I'm asking for. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman.